So hi, my name is Jason Kreidner. I work for Texas Instruments. Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. I'm going to talk to you briefly about using Android outside of the handset market, so in the non-mobile space. If you've played with a BeagleBoard, that's probably where you might have seen my name before. I started up the BeagleBoard.org project as an effort to try to build up an open source ecosystem around TI microprocessors, TI ARM microprocessors. And Qasim was the guy that did the initial Linux kernel port for that. So we've been involved for years around trying to engage the Linux ecosystem. Do we not have slides? One side only? Oh, okay. So please focus your attention this way. So I'm going to start out by trying to give you some of the challenges that we see around utilizing Android for non-mobile. Of course, the success of Android within the mobile space is absolutely undeniable, right? It's huge in phones, and of course now with Ice Cream Sandwich, we can all have access to a great code base for building tablets and tablet-like devices as well. But there are some significant challenges to building non-mobile devices, to building more traditional embedded devices. I heard some great hallway conversations on, well, what is embedded? And I think the answer is nobody knows. That you probably won't be able to stick two embedded Linux engineers in a room and have them create even remotely similar definitions for what embedded is. Embedded is something all on its unknown. And that's why it's pretty difficult for, so we get great software from Google, to create this great experience around Android, but they can't focus on something that we really can't even define, right? And so there's one big challenge right there is that Google doesn't have this, very narrow focus like they have in phones for all the various things that we might call embedded or non-mobile. And some of the things that they're doing, and some of the things about Android and Android's future are making it more costly for us. So it may not always fit because of the expenses that are going into building an Android device, and it might increase your costs versus doing some other things like working with traditional embedded Linux distributions. And also compared to different embedded Linux distributions, it might not be as scalable as those are. And I think the big fear is, as an open source developer community, there's this huge energizing factor of Android and all the opportunity. And I personally had expectations that Android would just absolutely take off in the embedded space outside of mobile phones, and for a lot of embedded Linux, just take over the distributions as the distribution of choice for building embedded platforms. And a lot of the open source software developers really aren't getting behind that and just focusing their attentions around Android. There's still a lot of other embedded Linux distributions, a lot of other development outside of Android that's really capturing the open source software developers' mind share. So let's dive into those problems just a little bit. So Google's focus. The roadmap and future of Android is really from Google is focused around the Google experience devices, right? Every time they do another generation of Android, they want to build the next great experience, and they focus their engineering effort around making that experience something that we all want to have in our mobile phone, and that they need to do that to try to compete with other mobile phone operating system vendors. But what we find is that here's a quote from Christy Wyatt at Motorola. Writing code to support hardware other than Google's Nexus model is proven to be a tall order for smartphone makers. So for even people making smartphones, Android is getting more difficult to bring to market quickly as the system has gotten more complicated. And of course, for those of us that aren't doing mobile, we have to deal with the fact that the Android market and the Google apps may not be available to us because there's very specific requirements for getting those. And the stack itself is catering to phones and tablets. And you don't know for sure that when Google comes out with another version of Android that you're going to get access to all the sources. Reference Honeycomb, right? That never did come out. And then if you're building a non-handset sort of device, you don't really have a way to go and talk to Google about making some choices unless it's very difficult to have that audience with Google about the future roadmap when it's not about the mobile phone sets. So let's talk a little bit about the affordability aspect and how it's getting a little bit more costly. So you see the hardware requirements increasing significantly. So with Ice Cream Sandwich, you see something like 3D graphics acceleration as being an absolute requirement for having that experience, right? So it's no longer just sort of a nice to have. Really, you can't have a good experience without a 3D graphics accelerator. So you see this push in requirements for faster processors, more cores, additional memory consumption. So you see the cost of your system going up for implementing the latest dessert. And the R&D investments that you might put into customization of your Android platform, not being something that you can sustain across the different generations as Google continues to innovate. And you see even like where customizations have been made to the Android stack specifically for phones, very rarely make it up into the Google Android open source project. For non-phone classes of devices, for embedded devices, really never happens, right? There's really not a path if you're not a phone. So it's rare for the phones, but for other types of devices, it's not even there. And of course, now there's a little bit of fear of royalties. When you're producing this experience with a higher level stack, that you might have to negotiate with different people to try to get licenses for different patent IP. And of course, then you might have to deal with the cost of licensing the Google apps if that's an important part of the experience of your product. And then this scalability, right? So why is there, I'm not going to go in, I'll let Qasim go into all the wonderful and great reasons. I kind of want to almost jump in and kind of defend some of this stuff because there's so many wonderful things about Android. But there's still so much need to work with all the other embedded distros, somewhat due to different scalability things that currently Android doesn't have so much. So it's really pretty statically tuned for phones and tablets. And a lot of the configuration options that you might want in your embedded system are somewhat difficult to achieve with Android. So if you wanted to change the C library to something other than Bionic, I think that Kareem had some interesting talk about how to work with multiple C libraries within the same system yesterday, and that there's lots of things being done to address that. But that's a challenge today with Android. And different language bindings, right? So maybe your developers really aren't just using C and Java to do their development. They want to use Python and Ruby and JavaScript and and other interfaces, Perl, and all those language bindings aren't necessarily there in that environment for the API that's on the Android platform. There's another talk today about a headless operation, but that's not something that's typically supported. And how do I do the different network configurations and different things? So those are challenges. You have a very limited shell. If you want to try to do other types of package management, that's a challenge. And one of the use cases we had for the Beagle Bone. It's another ARM development system. But we wanted to have really fast boot so that you plug it in, it shows up as a drive within a few seconds. And that's not something you can easily do with Android because it makes all these assumptions about things you want to do in the system around boot in the user space. So if you wanted to use something like systemd and trim down your daemons to only start up when certain ports are opened, these are things that are very difficult to achieve in Android, as it wants to automatically start up a bunch of operations, and it's difficult to pare that down. So if you want the ultra-fast boot times, Android might not always be the best choice for you, depending on what you call ultra-fast. And then sort of the overriding fear for me here is that not just, so you guys and all of the rest of the Linux developer community, is the interest growing or waning around Android? And there are a few reasons why some of the initial excitement may be somewhat evaporating. And counter that in a minute. But so the developers from a lot of the open communities haven't really fully migrated into working within the Android distribution. You find folks like GStreamer, which is a very useful open source project that a lot of us like to use. And because it solves certain problems around something like set-top boxes, and that not being something brought back into the Android fold in the Android open source project. And you see other distros really solving problems and moving ahead quickly in things that we can't really leverage in Android, right? So you see Ubuntu solving problems around servers and multi-core and really things that Android isn't quite there yet on. And there's a lot of existing software that people need to leverage for their products. We see thin clients, one that for me it seems somewhat natural that Android might be a great starting point for building something like a thin client. But there are a lot of existing software stacks that the thin client developers would like to leverage, and it seems like a lot of times it just doesn't make sense to try to force them over to Android. And I think, if you look at, again, going back to some of the projects that I'm working on, doing some things with something like Node.js, and things that are very, very easy to just pull up quickly in a more traditional embedded Linux distribution. You just configure, make install. It's all good, and that isn't there so easily with Android. And I think this is the most overriding concern, is that a lot of us really want to have control and insight over the direction of things, and with Android, some of the open source developers lose that a bit. So, left with the question: can Android really address the future needs of embedded non-mobile devices? And for the answer to that question, I'll bring up Qasim, who's our non-mobile Linux lead engineer, or Android lead engineer.
Can you hear me? Yep. So, Jason, you took 5 minutes more. It's 9:25 a.m. and the temperature just dropped 1 degree centigrade. So temperature is now 22 degrees centigrade in this hall. So this is where am I seeing this? Like, this is on this goggle. It's actually from Recon Instruments. Thanks to Zai and Gil for providing me this. And this is running Android. It is based on DM3730 from Texas Instruments. It's the same processor that's on Beagle board, and it is running Android from aeroboard.org. And definitely this is not a phone. So this is what we are talking about, like how do we use Android beyond phones, right? Like, and Jason has set really a high bar on me to really go and explore the challenges that Android has put in front of us to take Android beyond phones. So with the droids, I would definitely say like we have to stop a bit and then look and then proceed. Because the speed at which the Android is actually moving, it's very difficult for us to catch up in embedded world. So we got to stop a bit and then look what is actually needed, and then we got to proceed. So for embedded world and for non-mobile devices, if you see, for embedded and non-mobile devices, we have new jobs to do. And with all due respect, we have to bring in new technology to embedded world. There is, we need to enable innovation, like we have to move fast and innovate these embedded devices, and we have to create new business model. Okay, so I have some examples like what I exactly mean. So that's after stopping, like if you take a big picture and then if you just go look deep, things are not same. They are changing, or I would say they have already changed. User today demands experience. Like it's not like we were working on user experience before, but user is today demanding experience. And ecosystem is not about enablement. Earlier we used to think like how do we enable an ecosystem. Today ecosystem is established. How do we leverage the existing ecosystem? And how does the industry really focus? Like earlier industry used to focus for like 4 years, 5 years down the line, like what happens and things. But today it is not about the focus. It's like how can I rapidly or quickly adopt these changing needs of this industry and the market. So that's what is happening. I have few examples to explain each of these, like what exactly they mean. So we all know the pinch effect. So this is really creating a lot of problems for this embedded world. Like an engineer who is using oscilloscope, he is an engineer who has been using oscilloscope for all his years, but as soon as he sees his picture with all the waveforms and all, to zoom into it, he wants to do this pinch effect, right? Like he wants to move screens with his finger, and then he wants to traverse through the waveform. So the requirement or the user requirement is completely changing there. And I have few quotes from all industry experts who are actually very concerned about the changing needs. Like if you see Beckhoff and Fujitsu, these guys are actually in this embedded and HMI world for so many years, and they have raised this concern, and there is a clear requirement of removing all push buttons and bringing all that experience on touch screens. They want to bring all the controls on touch screen. They don't want to operate over push buttons. And in an industry today, like as soon as you touch the icon or you touch some machine operation, you want to really feel that, like you want the haptics feedback to be coming. So the complete UI experience or user experience today is completely changed. And so that's one of the major requirement for embedded and more non-mobile world to actually support these growing demands of user experience. And the next thing is like most of the embedded equipments or non-mobile equipments today, they want to have it connected. So this is mainly for the ecosystem usage. Like sitting in one part of the world, I want to develop an app, and I want to deploy that app in remote area of, or the device is located in some other remote area, I want to deploy that app. Or I want to have access to the devices, and my device has to be connected to other devices which is there in the other part of the world. So the connected experience is actually bringing in new challenges. So as I said, like there is no requirement today on ecosystem enablement. The requirement today is like how do I encache the existing ecosystem. So in one of the quotes, it clearly says like even for an isolated system, people are actually asking for an app store. Okay, like my device is, I don't want to keep my device as an oscilloscope anymore. Like I want to use this device for multiple uses. And as soon as I deploy application to it, different application to it, my device behaves it different, right? So that's what everyone is actually looking at. And then, like if you see, there are so many industry experts and markets, they want to actually have their own or control or have their own app market to meet the needs of their users. So these are something which are changing on the connected world or the ecosystem world. And if you see, trends in each industry is changing. The user demand and the ecosystem demand is not just changing in consumer electronics, it's changing in home consumer, it's changing in portable enterprise, industrial, automotive, and each and every area is having this new demand of user experience and then ecosystem. So like my refrigerator has to have a panel, like I want to see my recipes on my refrigerator. So we are already seeing these things, right? Like, So my TVs, like the television sets, they have to be smart and they have to be connected. I don't want to have a dumb electronic machine sitting on my hallway. So there are so many things which are continuously changing. And to take a broader look, like what we are seeing, right? Like, so first thing, like user demand and user experience is really changing. So as the smartphone users are increasing, today user experience and user experience demand is continuously changing. Like earlier, when anybody used to define his embedded product, like it used to, he has to give the experience of a desktop world. Like there should be a start button and he has to click the start button and it should open a new window. And he has to have a minus and then the square and then the cross to close windows, right? So the demand was, the user experience was completely tuned towards desktop world. So the user of a machinery or user of a HMI, he can use it very easily because he is known to that world. Today, as the smartphone users are really increasing, the demand is changing from desktop world to the smartphone world. So user is actually expecting the smartphone experience on every single device that he is operating. And ecosystem is completely changing, like they want to have pre-enabled ecosystem for like what we see on smartphones. And industry is definitely, it's as I said, like industry is not focusing, but industry has to really meet these demands and which is rapidly changing, so it has to catch those things. So that's another major thing. So just to summarize here, like we saw that industry is completely, the user demand is changing, user experience is changing, the ecosystem requirement is changing, and industry has to meet all these growing demands at a very fast and high rate. So what do we have in our hands to meet all these ecosystem and user space need and then user experience need and then the innovation factor and so many other like business model and all these things, right? So stop, look, and now proceed with the droids. So Android is open, Android is free to consume, Android is free to distribute and productize. Why Android? Like as you saw in the previous slide, smartphone users are really increasing compared to desktop and laptop at very high pace. Okay, and then Android is the choice of smartphones today. Like if you see, I'm not sure if you're clearly seeing that, but Android has like 58% market share in smartphones today, and Android is the #1 operating system distribution for any smartphone today. So whatever Android is doing is actually creating that user experience and ecosystem demand that has actually brought in this embedded world into that mess or requirement, whatever you call. So Android is need of hour. So we need to use Android for embedded applications if we want to really meet the ecosystem user and innovation demand. So but how do we actually use Android into non-mobile space or into non-mobile space and really the embedded world applications? So few things that, as Jason pointed out, there are a lot of challenges for us if we take Android into embedded space, but there are a lot of advantages when we take Android into embedded space. And first and foremost thing, so I might not have answers to all the questions that Jason has put into, but I'll give the clear picture of how you can actually use Android for your embedded space or non-mobile phone application. So that way it should be very clear on how to actually overcome those challenges that we have heard in the first half of this session. So leverage the brand Android. Like Android actually has huge brand associated with it. Like as soon as I make a new product and I say like I'm running Android on it, it actually creates so huge hype and demand for that particular product. So encash that brand instead of just worrying about like, does Google care about my product and my remote control or my television? Like Google doesn't care, like we all know that. So but you really use the brand that Android has created. Customize Android. Like Android is definitely static, but definitely you have a lot of options to customize Android using IndyCase, and it will definitely reduce your R&D efforts. There are ways to do it. I'll explain how we can actually achieve that. So keep Android products affordable. Affordability is in our hands. Like when I define a product, I can really think of like how I can make an Android affordable to a particular market. So you can definitely think of right device, right peripherals to choose, and right distribution to look, and do right R&D investment so that you can actually do keep your Android product affordable. And the last and very important thing is you have to join the right Android community. Okay, today we all have this concern that Google doesn't listen to us, we don't have Google experts talking to us, like I don't know how to ask question, like how this is done, but definitely there is a huge forum and huge Android community around which you need to get into to get your answers for all these non-mobile phone applications. So I go into each of these in detail. So on Android, the brand, like as I said, like you focus less on Google care abouts, you look mainly into like what value this Android branding would really bring, and you don't rush on the new dessert that comes to you. So like say today we get lot of questions from customers like who ask, I need ICS on BeagleBoard today. We say like you had gingerbread like for last 1 year, like what were you doing with that, and why do you want to change to ICS today? Like there is no real answer to it, but they say like no, I want to get onto ICS, give me that, give me SGX libraries, give me multimedia, give me everything. And Android latest dessert doesn't solve all the embedded world problems. So those things will remain the same. Like for example, Android has come out with new camera interfaces and other things and new very latest camera features in Android ICS, but embedded world really doesn't care, like non-mobile phone doesn't really care, but still we want to get onto Android ICS. So that's the need that we actually create. So we just have to stay on what Android Desert actually has been stabilized in the market. So with that, what you get is like when you post queries, you have experts who have already got used to that environment of Android Desert, and then they can quickly answer your questions. We all know that Android comes as AOSP, and once it is AOSP, only then you get everyone, only then everyone can get hands-on to it, right? Like if you post ICS question tomorrow, if Android ICS is released today and if you post question tomorrow, no one knows about it. So you have to leave Android settle a bit in the ecosystem, and then you post your questions, definitely there is answer to it. If you are really caring about Android market and Google apps, I would say like there is definitely a possibility to get it, but if you, as I said, like if you want it, you definitely get it. The way to get it is like if you are having Google apps and Google market requirements, then definitely your phone will fall under the category of phones or tablets. So earlier it was very difficult to get Google licensing because phones were very difficult to make, right? Like with tablets, like definitely you can associate your product as a tablet and definitely go for certification. You can get compatibility test suite running, and then you can definitely meet all the criteria for Google. And if you are really having a high volume, go manufacture your product with some OEMs, ODMs of Android. They have authority to relicense all these Google apps and Google Android market apps. So definitely you will be able to deploy it in your product. And the last thing is like you have to leverage Android engineering community. So as I said, it is spread across multiple forums. I'll give more details into it. And then you have to learn how to customize Android. Like this is not a new stack to anybody, like the picture is known, but what I mean to say here is like Android is definitely static, but it is customizable. You can program and get your product done in a very easy way. So it is static, it is actually an advantage to me because you should use Android as a single source or single static source which is fully productized, tested, and you should use it like a baseline, and then you add your customization and things and differentiators to it, and then you program it and you release to market. So there are multiple ways of customizing it. You can either customize the software or you can actually customize the hardware. So for customizing software, I have an example like where you can come up with your differentiator as an NDK and then have it running in parallel to Android software stack, and then you can maintain it separately always, and as the kernel version moves or as the Android version moves, you can keep bringing this functionality or this feature set into the existing stack and keep maintaining it for moving kernel versions and Android versions. So this is some stack that we always present to customers, like you have your customized framework, keep it separate, like use NDK, use kernel APIs, and you can definitely achieve what exactly you need. And everything is not in Android for sure, but you can really build it, and it is very easy to do. And if you're really not interested to really touch the software part, you can think of building an accessory to your existing device. So this is one approach that I see like majority of enterprise and many markets actually using it. They are not creating a product from scratch today. Like earlier I used to see like FedEx used to have their own rugged PDAs where this guy used to carry. Today they have an Android smartphone and an accessory to it. Okay, so with that, like you bring your Android app onto an existing tablet or a smartphone, and you create an accessory that needs for your market need, and then you just give that in your hands of the field person or any user. So that will create that will bridge the gap, and you can leverage the Android devices. You can just create an Android app and then create an accessory to make or achieve the need. That's very easy to do or get customization on hardware part. So these are the challenges. These are few challenges which were addressed. Like if you want really market app, you want licensing, you want to reduce R&D, you want to customize or do any of these things. These are very easy to do. So that's what I tried to answer now. How do we reduce fragmentation? This is another problem that keeps coming to our notice. Like Android has a lot of fragmentation issues. So, but fragmentation is really inevitable. But with the help of Linux Foundation, we can definitely get. Yesterday we had this panel discussion where we really saw like in kernel, like we are getting a lot of patches in. Google is also very serious about keeping Android less fragmented. Then there is a lot of I had a couple of points. I think I'm running out of time. Silicon providers are really playing safe, and OEMs, ODMs are really keeping Android and kernel versions separate. So I'll just jump two more things, and I'll just leave it here. But I think we have some more things to talk about. So I have 2 more minutes to talk. No? Okay. So I think we made a point here, like Android is definitely possible to take it into non-mobile phones, and there are definitely a lot of challenges when we start picking up Android, but lot of things can overcome. It is actually bringing in a lot of value add to silicon providers and OEMs and ODMs. But and if you want to know more about Android deploying into non-phone spaces, like you can definitely be in this room. There are a lot of good topics today which are getting covered to address this. I'll leave it to Jason, like if we get time to.
So my apologies to Qasim if anybody knows me, and I think a lot of techs in that penchant for filibustering. So I took a bit of Qasim's time, so my apologies. So
great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Qasim.